Hey, I hope this video finds you in good health. It's a video about a possible contradiction in the apology of Socrates, that is. The edition I read was by Hugh Strednick and Harold Tarrant, I believe 2003. And, this is the cover. And it's going to revolve on two things mainly, which is honor and reputation. So let's get right to it. Honor is the more straightforward of the two when it comes to Socrates, because of course we have to determine how Socrates feels about these two things before we can determine whether there's inconsistency in his beliefs. And with honor, it's summarized in these two statements pretty much, that he places it as the highest good, sort of as the very goal of your human existence. He says in 28b, "You are mistaken, my friend, if you think that a man who is worth anything ought to spend his time weighing up the prospect of life and death. He has only one thing to consider in performing any action, that is, whether he is acting justly or unjustly, like a good man or a bad one." And of course, you say that honor is the result of acting justly. And again, he continues in 28d. "The truth of the matter is this, gentlemen: where a man has once taken up his stand, either because it seems best to him or in obedience to his orders, there I believe he is bound to remain and face the danger, taking no account of death or anything else before this honor." So that's it really. With honor, it's really simple. In fact, all throughout the apology, you see it. He tells you how he was ordered to arrest a man unjustly by the 30 commanders, but that he refused because he had no fear of death. He placed honor above his life, essentially saying that a life without honor is not worth living. An unexamined life is not worth living. And I think examining your life sort of goes hand in hand with honor. I'm not sure I can make that claim, but I think it's fair to say that. So that's it really for honor. And now we get to reputation, which is a little tricky, I think. I think this is where the main problem I had when I was reading it, which ultimately made me read it again and sort of skim read it a third time, because I just couldn't really wrap my mind around it. At the beginning of the book, he addresses the charges that he doesn't believe in the gods, and that one is dismissed pretty quick. So I think we should pay more attention to the charge of corrupting the youth. And he says that this began before the trial, and that he was accused by the people really through gossip, and there are a lot of slander, and that basically this sort of claim that's vague and doesn't really mean much of that. He inquires about things in the heavens and below the earth, and that he's a bad influence somehow. They can't really articulate it, but they don't like him. And he says that this all began when he was declared the wisest man of all by the Oracle of Delphi. And he didn't believe the claim, but he couldn't not believe it because it came from God, from the divine. So he set out to look for somebody who was wiser than him, and so he went to a man with a high reputation for wisdom, and he found that even though he made claims to wisdom, he didn't really have any wisdom. And so he set out and he interviewed people who had high reputations of wisdom, and here it is. My honest impression was thus, 22a, by the way. It seemed to me as I pursued my investigation at God's command that the people with the greatest reputations were almost entirely deficient. So you see that he seems to be placing some importance on reputation, right? Because he is going after people who have a reputation. But he ends up finding out that the people with reputation don't know much. So reputation has a flaw, right? Like he has to have reached that conclusion that there's a flaw with reputation. You can't really believe it. And he actually finds that some of the people who were thought not to be remarkable actually were quite wiser than these people, and he ultimately distinguishes himself from the people with a high reputation, and he reaches a conclusion that he is wiser than them in the sense that he is aware of his own ignorance. So the very beginning, it's already sort of tricky because it's like, like reputation, is what drives him to these people. So the reason he's interested in them is because of the reputation, at least for the politicians, because then he goes from politicians to poets to craftsmen. So you could say that he's interested in the poets because of their poems and so on, but at least for the politicians, it seems pretty clear that the only reason he even spoke to them in the first place was because of the reputation. And then he doesn't talk much about reputation. Well, he does in one instance, but we'll get to that in 1 second. And it's towards the end, he's talking about, he's addressing sort of the elephant in the room, which is that whenever people are tried, apparently, they would just cry in front of the jury and make pitiful appeals and just try to get as much sympathy and get themselves acquitted on pity rather than by arguing. And he thought that the point is, right before 35a, the point is that for my own credit and yours, and for the credit of the state as a whole, I do not think that it is honorable for me to use any of these methods at my age and with my reputation. Which it may be true or it may be false, but at any rate the view is established that Socrates is different from the common run of mankind. Now, if those of you who are supposed to be distinguished for wisdom or courage or any other virtue were to behave in this way, it would be a disgrace. So he makes a distinction. He's not saying anybody who engages in these sort of behavior would be a disgrace. He's not saying that anybody doing that it would be a disgrace. He's saying that specifically people with reputation must not under any circumstance do this. And so he seems to be putting some sort of, he clearly, like, he's putting value on reputation. I don't think you can argue against that. In fact, right afterwards, he continues, it goes on to say, I have often noticed that some people of this type, for all their high standing, go to extraordinary lengths when they come up for trial, which shows that they think it will be a dreadful thing to lose their lives, as though they would be immortal if you did not put them to death. In my opinion, these people bring disgrace upon our city. Then skip a little bit forward, and he says, if you have even the smallest reputation, gentlemen, you are not to listen to these methods. Skip a little bit more. On the contrary, you must make it clear that anyone who stages these pathetic scenes and so brings ridicule upon our city is far more likely to be condemned than if he kept perfectly quiet. And I think that part is key, because he's talking about reputation implicitly. This is sort of unconscious, almost, it seems, to me at least. He's saying you would bring ridicule upon our city, so he cares about the city's reputation. Like, he's saying that to damage your city's reputation is to act dishonorable, sort of. So, I think Socrates cares about reputation. But the thing is, and the problem that I seem to have with this book is on it's on 29E, more or less. He goes, and I love this quote, by the way. I loved it until we'll get to it. My very good friend, you are an Athenian and belong to a city which is the greatest and most famous in the world for its wisdom and strength. Are you not ashamed that you give your attention to acquiring as much money as possible? And similarly, with reputation and honor, and give no attention or thought to truth and understanding and the perfection of your soul. And this is where, to me, it sort of all fell apart when I read it, because he had just said that you should give up your life before you disgrace yourself. So I couldn't put it together, and it was really good timing. I happened to be on a class called The Examined Life by Professor Farnham at Dawson. And I remember I missed the class, maybe more than one, but I missed the class and they were reading the apology, and I remember I asked, hey, is Socrates contradicting himself in this passage? And what I was expecting as an answer was, yeah, in fact, he is. We went over this last class, and I thought I was going to embarrass myself because it seemed pretty clear to me. But instead, he asked me to see him after class, or to send him an email, and I did, and we actually had a wonderful conversation that I'm super grateful for. And we sort of went back and forth. And I would love to give him a lot of credit for this. I think he played a key part in this whole charade. But it turns out that apparently there isn't a record of this inconsistency, and I actually ended up Googling it, and I couldn't find anything about this. So my claim essentially is that he's saying that you should be ashamed for acquiring as much money as possible. You should be ashamed for acquiring as much honor as possible. You should be ashamed for acquiring as much reputation as possible. And here you can argue that acquiring is not the same thing as keeping. But the thing is, can you keep something you didn't without first acquiring it? And I think the answer is no. It could be yes with money. You can be born into money, but I don't think you can be born as somebody honorable. I think honor is something that you have to earn. Like you have to act justly, and that will lead you to acquire honor. And then, with reputation, you can sort of make an argument that you shouldn't worry about how people perceive you. But that's the problem, is that Socrates clearly cares about the reputation, because he argues that that it would be a disgrace to bring ridicule upon our city. And he's saying that you should prioritize the perfection of your soul, and that you should prioritize truth. But then it's sort of, you could be generous and say, oh, Socrates isn't saying that you shouldn't care about these things. He's saying that you shouldn't prioritize them over those things that are more important. But then there's another problem, and it's that he continues, and if any of you disputes this and professes to care about these things, I shall not at once let him go or leave, no. I shall question him and examine him and put him to the test. And if it appears that in spite of his profession he has made no real progress towards goodness, I shall reprove him for neglecting what is of supreme importance and giving his attention to trivialities. So he's saying that those three things are trivialities. And I'm certain there's an inconsistency there. You cannot say that you should give up your life before dishonoring yourself, and that acquiring honor is a triviality, and that acquiring reputation is a triviality. But you've seen the title of this video. The question is, did he do this purposely? And that's because I got a little bit of an idea, a funny little thought that popped into my head. When Meletus is accusing him of not believing in the gods, Socrates finds an inconsistency in his claim. He says that he's accusing him of believing in the gods, but not believing in the gods. It runs something like this. 24C. It runs something like this. Socrates is guilty of corrupting the minds of the young and of believing in supernatural things of his own invention instead of the gods recognized by the states. That's not the one I wanted to read, but it's good enough, I actually want to read the other one. So here, I'm pretty sure this is Strawman. Look, because he says that, and then he sort of changes it to, he first claims that Meletus is accusing him of making up his own gods, and then he changes it into that he believes in the children of God, but not in gods. But that wasn't the original claim. The original claim was that he goes here. Well, one second. Let me finish this thought. Yeah, so I think this is Strawman. Look, because he changes the argument from you are making up your own gods to you believe in supernatural matters, but not in supernatural beings, and eventually he changes it to that he believes in the gods, But this is the important part. Whether it's just Strawman or not, that's a different topic. I'm getting ahead of myself here. 27a. Will the infallible Socrates realize that I am contradicting myself for my own amusement, or shall I succeed in deceiving him and the rest of my audience? It generally seems to me that he is contradicting himself in this indictment, which might just as well run Socrates as guilty of not believing in gods, but believing in the gods. And this is pure flippancy. I don't know how to say that word. Then I don't want to get off topic, but I believe there's a Strawman there. Anyways, and that's the thing, guys. I think that Socrates caught Meletus contradicting himself, and he thought of the possibility that he was doing it sort of to mock him. So maybe he decided to just get back at him and, saying that acquiring honor is a triviality and that you shouldn't do it, while clearly believing that that's exactly what you should be doing. It's like, then he goes on to say that it's sort of as if he was being accused of believing in the the little baby horses, but not in the horses that bred them. And it's sort of like, oh, Socrates believes in acting honorably, but not in honor, guys. Like Socrates believes in preserving honor without first acquiring it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy, guys, but that's it. That's the premise. Really, it's the not so infallible leaders realize that I'm contradicting myself for my own amusement, and I think that's feasible. I honestly think there's actually sort of a hint too. I think. Because after he says, the truth of the matter is this, gentleman, where a man is once taking up his stance here because it seems best to him, or in obedience to his orders, there I believe he is bound to remain and face the danger, routine, on account of death, or anything else before this honor. Right after he says, this being so, it would be shocking inconsistency on my part, like I don't know, as if he was hinting at it. I think that's a bit of a stretch, really, but it's something I would do. If I thought somebody was contradicting themselves just to make fun of me, I would probably contradict myself and sort of hint at it. But when it comes to reputation, however, I'm not sure that he did it on purpose. And this is something I talked about with Mr. Farnham, and he did a magnificent job playing devil's advocate. I would come into his office and be like, hey, look what I found. And he's like, yeah, but if you look at it from this point of view, and I was like, damn, like maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there. Until I brought that little bit of bringing ridicule upon our city. I think I was at that point that I think I finally convinced him for the second time, actually, because I think I convinced him on our first conversation, and then we sort of like backed out of the idea. But then I brought, and then we like sort of started over again. And when I mentioned the ridicule part of it, he remembered something about Homer, and this was most wonderful because he has the most appropriate background for this. I think I'm just rereading the same book like 3 times, but he has actually read far more than me and is far more knowledgeable. He quoted something of a paraphrase, actually, something from Homer. I'm not sure which book it was, but that there was a guy that in one of the stories that he, I think it was that he killed somebody, and that he let it be known, like so and so did this because he cared so much about his reputation that he risked his life, acquiring reputation. And he thought that maybe reputation was something very ancient within Socrates, like a part of Socrates had this very ancient belief engraved into him. And so I said, so what you're saying is that Socrates doesn't know where he places his reputation. And he said, I think that's it. And so the conclusion was that, and it seems very reasonable to say, because Socrates ultimately, his reputation cost him his life. And he found that the people who had a reputation for wisdom didn't really have it. But then he says that you must act according to your reputation, and that harming your city's reputation is dishonorable. So I think that for reputation, he doesn't really know where he is at, and this is what Mr. Farnham said was that when you're going from A to B, he said that Socrates with reputation is one of the ways in which he pushed us forward. And in his words, it was that when you're going from A to B, when you're transitioning from A to B, you have neither. You're neither here nor there. So I don't think he purposely contradicted himself with reputation. I think Socrates didn't quite figure out how he felt about it. I do think he was getting a kick out of it when with dishonor, though. I like to think so. Will the not so infallible Miletus realize that I'm contradicting myself for my own amusement? That Socrates believes in acting honorably, but not in honor. What do you guys think? Take care.